Look at this horrible, yucky, both rain and snow at the same time day that we're having in Alberta. What a wonderful day to then review the Canon PowerShot V1. Now, first thing, they brought the PowerShot name back. I think that's pretty cool. Second thing that you're gonna learn about this camera, it's not very well weather sealed, so I'm actually gonna put it away if that's okay. Luckily, both my family and the Drakes were on vacation in Mazatlan, Mexico, and my lovely wife actually shot all the sample gallery photos for this camera on our trip, so big thanks to her for providing that content for us. And you know, Jordan's also shot a lot of clips on this camera because this PowerShot V1, although ultimately designed as a vlogging camera to compete with cameras like the Sony ZV-1 series, this camera also has some interesting capabilities to take photos with that point and shoot aesthetic, or as a traveling family camera, which is exactly how we used it. So we're gonna take this two-prong approach to tackle this camera review today. Don't worry, Jordan's still gonna be doing the majority of the talking because this is primarily still a video camera, but there's some interesting stuff I want to talk about with photography, especially when it comes to the lens and the sensor. So I'm Chris Nichols, this is PetaPixel. What a yucky day. Let's get to it. But let's talk about handling first. I mean, this actually reminds me a lot of the old school PowerShot G1X. It's got a similar kind of feel and look to it. A nice lightweight body, 426 grams. This just uses a single UHS-2 SD card slot and the tried and true Canon LPE17 battery. So again, very familiar. Now, this is interesting. I gotta mention the R50 V alongside this camera because they both came out and were released at the same time. And although the R50 V has more potential perhaps as a photographic camera due to interchangeable lenses and a larger sensor, it's very video-centric in the way that they made the handling. So I only mention that because it's very interesting coming back to this V1 and being blown away by the fact that I've got classic photographic dials again, full manual, aperture priority, shutter priority, program, a nice selector switch to go back and forth between photo and video. I actually really like the handling on this camera way more than the R50 V. We do actually have the same display though from the R50 V. This is a fully articulating, just over million dot LCD panel. It's okay. Honestly, it's not that bright, and when we were in Mexico in those bright conditions, it was a little bit hard to see, so it doesn't feel like a high-end screen. But I do appreciate this, the grip on this. I actually found the R50 V to be very uncomfortable to hold. It had a very slim grip, and my fingers didn't quite close. This just feels a little bit more refined. The zoom rocker's in a really nice place. It's comfortable to use, and I like the thumb grip on the back. It's raised off the controls, so my hand's not pushing any buttons by accident. It actually feels very secure. Now, the R50 V also happened to have two control dials, but it was one on the back for the thumb and another on the back for the thumb. Not my favorite setup because you can't use both at the same time. And again, this impresses me a little bit more from a handling aspect because the V1 has, yeah, the not very good back dial here, but an excellent front control ring, and it's well dampened, so you could also use it for things like manual focusing. You can, of course, customize the functionality of that. So from a handling aspect, I actually really like it. Now, I did not expect to have an EVF on here, and I do not get one. There's no option for that. This hot shoe is exactly the same as the R50 V. It has the digital connections in front to work with Canon specific accessories, but there's no center pin, so I can't use it for like studio lights or anything like that. But most importantly, I want to talk about how this camera handles when it comes to the lens and the sensor. So this camera does have a mechanical shutter. It's a leaf shutter, very stable, goes up to 1/2000th of a second. And if you do need to like cut some light because maybe you got a really bright day, well, then you have a built-in 3-stop ND that you can use. Not really enough for long exposures, but it's nice if you do have extra light and you want to stay within your mechanical shutter. Now let's talk about the image sensor because this is quite interesting. This is using a Type 1.4 sensor. Photographically, that's actually very similar in size to a Micro Four Thirds sensor. A little bit less on the top and bottom, but you're getting a 3:2 aspect ratio, not 4:3. So you're getting extra sensor coverage on the sides. And so this gives us basically 22 megapixel images, and the image quality is good. It's actually very similar to what you get out of a Micro Four Thirds sensor. But even more importantly is what this sensor is then mated to. We've got a fixed zoom lens that basically gives us a full frame equivalency of 16 to 50. That's cool. Like, it's an ultra wide range that you don't normally see on a camera like this. We're not going to get telephoto for portraits and stuff, but this could be a really cool landscape camera. The one issue though that I am going to mention here, it's not a particularly fast lens. It's an f2.8 at the 16mm range and then f4.5 at the 50mm range. And this is largely going to keep us to extensive depth of field. It's very hard to get any sort of shallow depth of field out of this camera. And that is in contrast to something like a interchangeable lens micro four thirds camera, where you can get lenses like f1.7, 1.4, or 1.2 as far as primes go. Or another analog would be the Panasonic LX100, which had a very similar size sensor, but had an f1.7 to f2.8 lens. Now this camera does shoot JPEG, RAW, and compressed RAW, so you do get that extra dynamic range, and that certainly gives us a benefit over, what a point-and-shoot camera would give us. And for Mazatlan, where we're shooting bright sunny days, dark shadows in some cases, it's really nice for that extra DR. We can shoot RAW and get that when we need it, and I think it actually took beautiful photos. It's a fast focusing camera, the tracking worked okay, you get nice color out of Canon like you always do, and so as a little companion travel camera, vacation camera, I think this actually could really do a fantastic job. And so let's take a look at our test charts, because yes, we did decide to shoot test charts for this camera to really see what detail we get here. We're actually getting pretty good detail comparable to what you'd expect out of a micro four thirds camera. Looking here at the center at our 16mm equivalent at f2.8, good detail, decent contrast. Stopping down to f5.6, I noticed a slight contrast boost, but we're basically already getting all the detail we want there. Corners were good too, because we're getting so much depth of field regardless that even at f2.8, the corners benefited slightly from focusing specifically at them, but going to f5.6, I didn't notice that much improvement. It's a very similar story here at 50mm. Looking at the center, we're getting f4.5, so we're already stopped down a fair amount. Good detail. I didn't notice really any difference going to f5.6, and it's a similar story when you look at the corners. Again, decent detail at f4.5, and when we stop down, basically the same story. So long story short, we're not getting a ton of variation across the lens zoom range as far as sharpness goes. It's very consistent performance. You're basically going to get everything in focus anyways. And again, for the aesthetic that we're trying to achieve, that's doing a good job. The last thing that I want to say about image quality on a camera like this, if it's able to mimic that kind of point and shoot style and aesthetic of shooting, I wish it had a built-in flash, and it doesn't. There's no pop-up flash, there's no fixed flash in the front, and that does seem like a misstep, because that's very popular with a lot of the young crowd and the travel crowd in today's photography. So clearly there's some fun potential here as a photographic tool, but this is still primarily a video camera. So let's go to Jordan now, pass this over to him. He's going to talk about it in hopefully a much nicer environment.
Okay, Chris got it half right, because yes, it is me, Jordan Drake, to talk about the video features on the V1, but no, we are not in a prettier location, but at least the freezing rain has stopped. So let's talk about the most important thing when we're talking about video performance on the V1, and that's its video record modes. So this camera can shoot oversampled 4K video up to 30 frames per second, and it is very detailed, and it's great that you've got this ultra wide lens that you can take full advantage of in those modes. The drawback is it's pretty slow to read out, so you will see some rolling shutter, especially if you've got your adorable daughter in the back of a tour truck or something like that. Now, if you're willing to forego some detail, there are some other record modes on there as well. You can go up to 4K 60p, though this does incur a 1.5 times crop, meaning less detail. There is also 1080 recording. You can record with sound up to 60 frames per second. If you're willing to drop into the slow motion mode, which doesn't capture any audio and automatically conforms your footage to slow-mo, you can go up to 1080 120. That said, the quality in this mode is really soft, even for 1080p recording. I was really surprised that the Canon V1 includes a fan to help with overheating, but it's cold and sucks out here, so we're not really going to be able to test that. So let's jump back into my office, talk about overheating on this camera. Okay, this is much more comfortable and a perfect place to talk about overheating on this camera. Now, the first test I always like to run is just set it to its most demanding mode. So I did 4K 24p, where it's recording full width of the sensor. And here I was able to record 1 hour and 9 minutes, not before the camera overheated. I barely had an overheat warning on the camera, but before the battery died. So second test, I decided to do the exact same thing, but plug the camera in. And here I was able to record for over 2 hours, and the overheat warning just kind of got stuck at the halfway point. The camera was a little bit warm to the touch, but not that hot. So I think if you're recording indoors in controlled environments, like doing long form stuff like a podcast or something, this camera is going to be absolutely fine. But hey, what about this nice light I've got going on in here? You see, basically any time I'm at my desk, whether I'm recording the PetaPixel podcast or doing overheating tests, I'm relying on a Westcott R50 V cob light. And the great thing about cob lights is it's a single light source, so you can very easily modify it. Like I'm using this rapid box switch in pretty much all of my indoor scenes, and you can see it just gives me nice, soft, flattering light that's still a little bit directional. But what I really like about the R50 V is you can get it in multiple kits, just with a straight reflector, with the softbox we see here, but also you can get the option to use it as a location light using a pair of Sony NP-F batteries that we've used for fill or for nighttime shooting all the time. And this isn't the only excellent, affordable, constant light that Westcott offers. Chris actually uses their U60B light for his own podcast setup. These aren't priced like high-end professional lighting fixtures, but they have been extremely reliable, and we're very impressed with the quality of the light that we get out of them. And if you want to try them for yourself, just click the link in the description below to try out an R50V yourself. And thank you so much to Westcott, they're PetaPixel's preferred lighting partner. Okay, we're back outside, and I'm actually using the internal microphones on the V1 to make a point, which is that audio is an area where the V1 absolutely excels. Unlike the Sony ZV-1 Mark II, we have both a microphone jack, which is great, but also a headphone jack. So my lovely wife, who's operating the camera, can monitor the audio and make sure that the wind noise isn't getting totally out of hand. But on top of that, I love that they include a windscreen, again, just like Sony did, in the box that clips right onto the hot shoe to keep that wind noise under control. And as you can hear right now, the built-in stereo microphone is actually quite good in this camera. And most of the time, audio is more important than video quality, and it's nice to see that's an area where the V1 is best in class. One thing that really surprised me is there are a whole bunch of weird differences between this Canon V1 and the R50 V that was launched on the same day, despite them both being in the same series. So the V1 does have a couple nice advantages. It has the fan that we've talked about, so for long-term recording, this is going to be the better option. And it has that windscreen that I do like if you're planning to use the internal microphones. But there's a lot of advantages for the R50 V that just aren't found here. We've got that 1/4-20 on the side of the camera for vertical shooting. It's got a mode dial with a bunch of custom video settings that's really useful. A color button that gives you quick access to things like C-Log, or the Canon 709 profile that is also missing in this camera. And if you're looking to check your metering while recording, the R50 V features false color that gives you that ability, but most egregious for me is that the R50 V fixed one of my biggest Canon bugaboos, which is having the horizon level disappear when you start recording. It finally addressed that, but now here on the V1, you still lose that level as soon as you start rolling. It is absolutely maddening. I was really hoping with this series you'd be picking between a small camera with a fixed lens or an interchangeable lens model that were otherwise functionally identical, but that's definitely not the case. Even though they were both released at the same time, I think these were two totally different developments. Okay, so now let's talk about stabilization on the V1. And it's important to point out that unlike Sony's ZV-1 Mark II, this does actually have some optical stabilization on the lens. And that's really nice because we can use it and still get a little bit of stabilization even at the absolute widest field of view that this can offer. And you can see there's some bounciness to it, but it does take out some of those micro jitters. However, I'd probably still enable a little bit of digital image stabilization for a bit of a smoother frame. So here we've enabled Canon's default digital image stabilization, and you can see the frame is a little bit steadier once we turn this on, and there's not a lot of weirdness in the frame. Also, because we're starting with such a wide lens, we're still getting a pretty ultra-wide field of view. Okay, and now we're using the enhanced mode, which does incur a pretty significant crop. We don't get kind of that ultra-wide look to the image anymore. And this mode does give you a very solid frame, but if you're shooting at slower shutter speeds like I'm using right now, and prefer to use, especially because we have an ND filter in this, you'll find you get the odd blurry frame that looks very odd. So I'd really only use this in conjunction with fast shutter speeds and really only in emergencies. There's one other digital stabilization mode on that, which is its subject track image stabilization. And this works similar to a lot of other systems out there where it'll try and use the built-in digital stabilization to keep your subject centered. But what I like with the Canon solution is you can also have it maintain composition while trying to use digital stabilization to maintain that frame. So you can still have a more interesting composition while walking around with the camera. Okay, it's not like we're getting beautiful backgrounds out here, so enough of sitting around in the cold. Let's go back to the office and I'll wrap up my thoughts on the V1. So after spending some time with the Canon V1, where do I think it fits? Well, let's start with photography. I do think it's funny that we haven't seen an enthusiast-oriented PowerShot for quite some time, but if you have an interest in architecture and landscape, this is actually a pretty compelling photo camera. You get the ultra-wide lens on it, sensor that's actually quite capable. Where it's going to let you down photographically is anything in the portrait range. First of all, this lens is quite short, not terribly bright at the telephoto end, and the lack of a pop-up flash or a center pin means you're not going to get that fun point-and-shoot aesthetic that a lot of people are chasing right now. But let's talk about it primarily as a video camera, and that's what this is really intended to be. Its direct competition is the Sony ZV-1 Mark II, a camera that I was a little bit disappointed in due to the lack of stabilization. I actually far prefer using the Canon V1 to the Sony model. The handling is a lot better, it feels like a much more polished user experience, and having the stabilization means this is definitely a camera I can walk around with a little bit. The major question though is, are you going to use this as a creator camera, like I am right now, where it's on a tripod, you can use it as a great webcam, an ultra-wide field of view. But if you plan to use this as a vlogging camera, I still don't think you can beat the DJI Pocket 3 with an integrated gimbal for very smooth motion and direct connectivity with wireless microphone systems, which is just incredibly convenient. But I really enjoyed my time with the Canon V1, and for doing what I did, taking out a small camera with a fixed lens on vacation, this is one of the most capable cameras that I've used thus far. But I really want to know, what do you think of Canon's latest video-centric cameras? Let me know in the comments below, and definitely check out the PetaPixel podcast, which I shoot in this same room with this same light. You can check it out right here on this same YouTube channel, or listen to it on all your favorite podcasting apps. Just search for the PetaPixel podcast. As well, if you want to support the show that we do here, the best way to do that is with a PetaPixel membership. This will allow you to view PetaPixel ads-free, get you a discount on our merch store, and you'll be able to download full-resolution JPEGs and RAWs from newly released cameras like this Panasonic V1 I'm talking about right now. $3 a month or $30 a year will get you access to all of those perks. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you all again soon with more on PetaPixel.